Welcome to the Small Business Matters podcast, where we talk to business experts and go beyond the trends to find out what's working for small businesses on Main Street and online. Now, let's get down to Main Street.
When you talk to customers about your products and services, do you find yourself getting tongue-tied with jargon? Do you have trouble getting your customers to clearly understand the value you or your product brings? Well, today we're going to talk about making sales through captivating stories that land with your customers every time. Joining us is April Dunford. She is the world's foremost authority on product positioning. With her expertise as a consultant and author, April helps companies make complex products easy to understand and love. Boasting an impressive 25-year career as a VP of marketing at various rapidly developing technology firms, she's collaborated with hundreds of growing technology companies such as Google, Epic Games, Postman, and others. April is also the acclaimed author of the best-selling book, Obviously Awesome, which delves into the art of positioning, and her just-released book, Sales Pitch, which unveils the secrets of crafting a winning sales narrative in the market. April, welcome to the Small Business Matters podcast.
Hey, so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. So let's talk about your latest book, Sales Pitch. Was there an experience with a salesperson or organization that gave you the idea to write this one?
Yeah, actually, the idea for the book came about from the work that I've been doing with clients on positioning. So my background is a positioning expert. I work with companies on their positioning. And what I was finding is that when I was working with companies on positioning, which is getting really tight on why they win in the market, what their differentiated value is, who their best fit customers are, I was finding that if I had a cross-functional team together and everybody understood that, marketing had what they needed to go and build great messaging. But sales, even if the sales team was in the room and involved in building the positioning, sales team would go back and they'd be like, well, I intellectually understand the new positioning. I'm just not really sure how to tell the story. And so they would go back to the sales team and the pitch wouldn't change. So I thought, well, there must be a way to build a good sales pitch. I mean, we must have a structure for doing this that I could teach people to make sure that that positioning survived the jump from marketing to sales. And when I went looking for it, it didn't exist. So I decided, okay, well, at this point, I had worked with a lot of companies and built a lot of sales pitches. So I thought it would make sense to build a book that would teach people, here's what the components of a good pitch looks like, and here's how to map your positioning to a sales pitch so that we do a better job of explaining why pick us over the competitors when we're in an actual sales situation.
So what is, at a high level, what does the book cover?
So it covers a couple of things. First of all, it gives people a way to think about selling and kind of an attitude to have when they're in sales, which I think is really important. And then secondly, it describes an 8-section sales pitch structure and how to take your product, figure out what your differentiated value is and how and who you're trying to target in the market. And then it will teach you how to actually map for your product the answer for those 8 sections and put it together into a sales pitch that really helps you stand out from the other alternatives in the market.
Interesting. So what are the common mistakes that sales and what are the common mistakes that people make in sales pitch development?
Well, the first thing is that, I've worked with 250 companies, and it's really interesting to see what the sales pitches look like at 250 companies because, we don't see these things. They're not out in public. So we only get to see them if the company shows them to us. The first thing that's really interesting is if you ask most companies, like they'll send me the sales pitch and I'll say, where did this come from? Like, who built this? And people will look at me like, I don't know, man. This thing has been here since the year of the flood. We don't know. And every time we put out a new release or we add something to the product, we add a slide or we move a slide around, but nobody ever throws the pitch out and starts from scratch. So that's one thing. The pitch has kind of evolved over time. Nobody really knows why it's structured the way it's structured. And I think that's a mistake. I think we can do much, much better than that. The second thing is that I work mainly with technology companies, and for the most part, the sales pitches are what I would call a feature walkthrough. So if you can imagine a tech product, you can imagine we have a menu across the top and there's 5 drop down menus. Most sales pitches consist of a salesperson or a sales engineer saying, "Okay, today we're going to show you the product. Look, we have these 5 drop down menus. Let's click on every one and I'm going to explain every single thing that's in each of those drop down menus." I think that's a mistake for a lot of reasons. One, it's overwhelming for customers on the receiving end of that. And two, it doesn't necessarily answer the question that the customers have. Often, when we're selling to businesses, the customers are not trying to answer the question, why pick you? They're trying to answer the question, why pick you over the other guys I'm looking at? If we're showing everything like all these features are equal, we're not really honing in on what makes us different and special. So I think those are the big 2 things that people miss on.
So in the book, you say it's not so much a book about sales pitches, but more about helping customers to buy. How are the two different?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned before, the book starts by talking about kind of an attitude we have to take in sales, at least in my opinion. And I think we've really not thought a lot about how difficult it is to buy our product. And it is really difficult. If you think about it, most of the time, if we're selling a product to a business, the person that's buying that product on the business side, most of the time, you're talking to a person that has never purchased a product like yours before. Like imagine we're selling accounting software. It's the controller or somebody inside the company. This is probably the first time they've ever purchased accounting software. So they don't know who the players in the market are. They don't know what their list of purchase criteria should be. They don't know what the state of the art of accounting software is. They don't know what's possible and what's not possible. All they know is the system they've got right now. Maybe they used one at a different one at a different company, but that's about it. Now, don't get me wrong, customers have done a lot of research before they talk to a salesperson. They've usually Googled like crazy. They've read anything they can get their hands on. They've gone on comparison websites. They've looked at all kinds of stuff. And what they're generally feeling is overwhelm. So they have so much information, they have too much information. And so now they're trying to figure out, hey, I got to make a recommendation to my boss about which one of these things we should buy, and I don't know what to do. If you look at the research on this, what customers actually want from us is not for us to show every single feature of the product. What customers actually want from a sales rep in a sales situation is they want perspectives on the market. They want help choosing between alternatives. And most of the time, we're simply not giving them that.
Overwhelm. You mentioned overwhelm a minute ago. It reminds me of a scene. It was a movie. I'm not sure if you ever saw this. It was with Robin Williams, and the movie was called Moscow on the Hudson, about a fellow that comes to America to live here.
This movie. Yeah, maybe.
And he goes into a grocery store and he looks at the shelves and he ends up passing out in the aisle because of the choices. Just so many choices that it completely it just blew him away. And I can identify that, particularly with a category like accounting. Now we focus on B2B here in this group at Experian. I'm curious why so many B2B purchasing decisions end in no decision.
This is an interesting thing. Like if you look at the data on this, it ties into this idea that the buyer is overwhelmed with choices and not really sure how to make a good choice. So if we think here we've got this poor buyer, most of the time the person is being assigned the task to figure out the thing to buy. So let's go back to my accounting software example. Maybe the vice president of finance went to the controller and said, "Hey, I hate our accounting software. We've outgrown it. Go look at it, figure out what we need to buy, and then come back to me and make a decision." Like that person who is tasked with making a short list, looking at all the alternatives, making a recommendation to their boss, that's a really on the spot kind of a job. It's risky making that decision. If that person does let's say they pick something, they take it to their boss, and their boss says, no, that's terrible. No, we would never buy that. Well, they're afraid, right? They're going to look stupid in front of their boss. Maybe they pick something and all the end users in the department hate it. Or maybe they pick something and it turns out it doesn't do something kind of critical that they should have known about, but they didn't know about. Like that person, that feels like a very risky decision. And so if we put it in that context, it's pretty easy for that person to look at their choices, feel overwhelmed, not sure what they should pick, and then simply go back to their boss and say, you know what, now's not a good time. Like the thing we're doing right now is okay. It's not perfect, but we got a lot of stuff going on right now. Let's just delay till next year. And what they're doing is they're crossing their fingers that next year the boss doesn't point at them and say, look, you're it. You're the person that needs to go figure this out. The data on this is kind of terrifying. So if you look at the data on this, the data shows that 40 to 60% of B2B purchase processes end in no decision. And if we scratch down on that to see what's actually happening, it's not that the buyer looked at all their options and decided, you know what, the thing we're doing now is actually fine. It's better than anything else. We'll stick with that. That's not it. In the majority of cases, the buyer looked at all their options, could not confidently pick one of all of these options that look the same. They're worried about making a bad choice. And they simply say, you know what, I'm not going to do anything here. This looks too risky. I don't know what to pick. So I'm not going to pick anything here. I think in B2B as sellers, we really need to think about what can we do to help a buyer feel comfortable about the purchase decision that they're making. And part of that is educating them on the entire market, not just us, but where does everybody in this market fit and how do we fit relative to everybody else so that they can feel confident that they understand their options, they understand their choices, and we've made the right choice for this business.
Yeah. Keeping that confidence going, making sure that
That's
they
right.
still feel good about it. And it's about effective communication, right? And instead, like you said, instilling confidence.
Well, yeah, it's really about, in some ways it's about teaching. Like if you think about it, again, I've got this buyer that knows a lot about their own company and their own company's pains and their own company's requirements. Um, and they've done a lot of research, so they know stuff about what's possible with all the different options out there. But what they don't have is what we have, which is a perspective on the market and a perspective on, well, look, these kinds of solutions are good for these things, but bad for these things. And these kinds of solutions are good for this, but bad for that. Like most of us operate in markets that if you came and asked us, well, draw us a picture of the market, we could draw you a little picture. But a buyer has a really hard time drawing that picture. Like what they see is, they go to Gartner Group, there's a top right quadrant and there's 30 companies in there. And they're like, I don't know, are these for big businesses, small businesses? Is this the right choice for me? How do I narrow it down to 3? I don't actually know. And so we as vendors, I think, need to adopt the attitude of we're really here to guide the customer. We're here to educate them. We're here to help them understand their options. And we're here to help them make confident, good choices, even if sometimes that choice is that they don't pick us and they pick someone else. That's okay too.
So is market insight, is that a good starting point for a good pitch? And how do we figure that piece out? Is it literally a Venn diagram of the competition and seeing where you stack up? How do you use market insight?
Yeah, I kind of see market insight as a little bit of something we do before we draw the picture of the whole market. Like it's our point of view in the market that informs how we placed people on the picture that we drew. So, put another way, it's if you think about the way most tech products get built, most tech products get built because the founder looked at something and said, like, let's take accounting software since we're talking about that. The founder looked at accounting software and said, you know what stinks about accounting software? Accounting software doesn't work good when we have this particular thing going on. So I'm going to make accounting software that works for companies that operate like this. And then they build something around that point of view. And so our insight into the market is that it's our way of saying, look, we understand a lot about this market and we built the product in a very specific way because we had a very specific point of view about the problem that we're solving. So I can give you an example. So I worked with a company called Help Scout. And what Help Scout does is they do customer service software. So think Zendesk is the big product in that market. But when they built that product, they were specifically working a lot with e-commerce businesses. And their insight into the market about e-commerce was that if you're an e-commerce business, you don't have salespeople and you don't have stores. So customer service is one of the few times you get to interact with your customers. So what they understand is that, if we can deliver a really amazing customer experience and customer service, that's actually a growth driver for the business. Now, if you look at most customer service software is not designed for that. Most customer service software is designed to get you off the phone. It's designed to push you to self-serve channels. It treats customer service like a cost center, not a growth driver. And so Help Scout's insight and the way they start their pitches is they'll talk to a customer service person inside e-commerce business and say, hey, your e-commerce, you have slightly different requirements for customer service. Like you really want to deliver an amazing service here. Because it's one of the few chances you get to actually interact with your customers. Now, if I start from that insight, then I say, well, look, what are your options here? Well, you could use a shared inbox, and a lot of e-commerce businesses start by just using a shared inbox. That's the easiest thing to do. But then if they're growing, eventually they want to be able to do more advanced service things like prioritizations and assignments and things like this. So then what have they got? Well, they've got traditional help desk software. And traditional help desk software has all the bells and whistles. The problem is it's not designed to deliver amazing experience. Like it assigns you a ticket number. You're not a person anymore. You're a ticket number. It's designed to push you to low cost channels and basically get you out of there as fast as possible. And in a perfect world, the e-commerce businesses would have a solution that is as easy to use as a shared inbox, but delivers an amazing customer experience, unlike this help desk software. So that's how they start their pitches, is kind of setting up, we're different. We have a different point of view on this market. And that's why we built this product differently. And we believe it's a really good fit for a customer like you if you happen to be an e-commerce business.
Many companies will start a sales conversation by asking customers about their pain points, about their problems. Why do you not recommend this?
I was taught that when I started out. I was taught that, we should come in, we should define the problem, or even before we define the problem, maybe what we'll do is we'll just ask the customers, like, well, what are your problems? What are your pain points? What are you looking for? Do you have any requirements? What are those requirements? And we would start by asking all those questions. I think there's a handful of problems with starting with the problem or starting with what we would call sales discovery, where we're asking a bunch of questions about what the customer is doing. The first one is the way I was taught was we would start with the problem. But if you looked at the pitches that we built, we defined the problem in this very vague way. So one of the first products I ever worked on was a database product. And we started with this definition of the problem was, hey man, there's a lot of data and the data is growing exponentially and you're going to need a way to manage all that data. Well, the problem with that definition of the problem is that any of my competitors can solve that problem too. So I'm not really differentiating myself at all if I start with that definition of the problem. I solve the problem, they solve the problem, we all solve the problem. I'm not really helping you pick me over anybody else. So that's an issue. I think starting with, again, if we go back to the Help Scout example, starting with my particular insight in the market is a much better way of starting that conversation because it's all about my point of view and it's particular to me. So there's that. The second thing is that, should we start with a bunch of questions and ask the customer, what is their problem? What can we do for you today? The problem with that is, again, if I go back to my example of this buyer looking for accounting software that's really sort of overwhelmed. I mean, part of their issue is they're not really sure what their requirements should be. They're looking to us for perspective on that. And so if we come in with this idea like, okay, tell me all your problems, and then we try to, on the fly customize a pitch and say, oh, well, we solved those problems, 9 times out of 10, we're going to give the same pitch that our competitors would give. But part of what we really want to do here is have a back and forth with the customer. So I think a better way, if we want to do discovery, which we absolutely do in a first sales call, a better way to do that would be to start with our insight. So if I take the Help Scout example, I'll start with this insight into, customer success is a growth driver. You, customer, do you agree with that? Is that true for your business? And then when we get to the discussion of alternatives, that's a perfect place to do discovery. So we could say, look, we work with a lot of e-commerce businesses, and what we've seen is most of them start out with a shared inbox, but then they have these issues and they need more features, and then they graduate to help desk software. How about you? What are you folks using? Are you using a shared inbox? Is that working for you? Are you finding that you're running out of steam on that? Are you finding that you need advanced features? What sort of advanced features are you looking for? So I can do it within that structure in a way where it's a give and take. So the customer is educating me about their specific situation, but I'm also educating them about the overall market, my perspective on that market. And I think that just works a lot better.
Interesting. Now, Salesforce, they're quite a force in CRM, right? Why do you think they are so successful in designing and selling their products? I mean, that's a enterprise level B2B solution. What is it about how they position their offerings that makes it so unique?
I think Salesforce does a bunch of stuff that's really great. But interestingly, years ago, I worked at a company that was the absolute leader in the CRM space before Salesforce came on the scene. And then when Salesforce came on the scene, it was neat to watch them position their product at the beginning. So at the beginning, they were only CRM, and they attacked a part of the market that the leader at the time, which was a big company called Siebel Systems, that was like a couple billion in revenue.
I remember. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Siebel was very, very strong at the high end enterprise part of the market. Salesforce came in and said, well, we're going to go into the part of the market that Siebel doesn't serve, which is the very, very low end of the market. So when they first launched, they were targeting companies that had less than 10 salespeople, which, I was at Siebel. We would have never sold to a company that had less than 10 salespeople. That was just way too small for us. Part of the reason we wouldn't sell down there is because those companies that were that small didn't even have an IT department. Our product was on-premise software, so you needed an IT department to get the thing stood up and to maintain the thing. Salesforce came on the market, and they were software as a service, one of the first big software as a service products. They came on the market and sold down at the very bottom and said, hey, little guys with less than 10 sales reps, you can get the same thing that the enterprises get, and you don't even need an IT department to do that because, hey, guess what? No software. And so they were very successful at establishing a beachhead in the market that, the leader in the market was unable to reach and didn't care about, frankly. And then once they had established that beachhead, they just gradually moved up market, and then started also adding on to other things, beyond CRM to their portfolio of stuff they could do. So I thought they were really smart in how they started. And then for years after that, even they developed such a dominant position in the CRM space, even after they had Service Cloud and Marketing Cloud as additional offers, the way they sold the CRM for decades, I think it's a little bit different now, is if you didn't have any Salesforce products at all, they wouldn't try to sell you everything all up front. They would just try to sell you the CRM, because the CRM, in their opinion, was the backbone. You needed to get your customer data right. And then they were so dominant in that market, it was an easy sell to come in and sell you the CRM, not so much with the other things. So they would come in, and instead of trying to sell you everything all at once, they'd come in, they'd sell you on the CRM. And then once you were all going good on the CRM, then they'd come back in and try to sell you the marketing stuff. So the neat thing about that is that if they had tried to sell you the marketing stuff at the beginning, then they would have had to position their marketing product as the best marketing product in the world, better than all the other marketing things out there, which, arguably they were or were not. But there's a lot of big players in that space. Instead, what they'd do is they'd sell the product that was the winner, which was the CRM. Then they would come in and cross sell you the marketing thing and position that not as the best marketing product in the world, but the best marketing product for someone that's already running Salesforce in the CRM. Much easier sell. And so for decades and decades, they did that. Now, it's interesting to watch them now because the portfolio is much bigger. And now they have other products like Slack or MuleSoft or some of these other things that potentially a customer could start with Slack and then move to the CRM and do other things. So you're seeing them sort of move towards more of a portfolio approach and maybe having the AI stuff kind of bring it all together. I think they're still working through that positioning, but it's interesting to watch that positioning evolve as they've grown up as a big business.
Yeah. No software. I remember that. And I remember Siebel. I think it's interesting that you mentioned marketing platforms. HubSpot has, maybe they've taken a page out of Salesforce's playbook because they introduced a CRM, a low-end CRM, and then
that's right.
And they're really branching out from that product. So
I think it's a genius move because it makes sense to have marketing and CRM go together. Like if you have one, you want the other. And so as they moved up market in the marketing automation space, at some point you could see like it would make sense for them to have a CRM. And I thought they did a really great job of launching the CRM, having it be fairly full featured, and making it free for a very long time anyway. And, and then now it's interesting how much HubSpot CRM you see out in the market. You see a lot of it.
We like to test different approaches here at Experian. How do you test a sales pitch? How do we know if it's working? I mean, we would know a drop off in sales if it's working really badly, but is there some science around testing pitches?
Yes and no. So I'll tell you how I do it. I don't know if it's particularly scientific, but it's worked for me. When we make a change in positioning, what we'll do is we'll get a cross-functional team together and we'll work through the positioning. So who do we compete with? How are we different? What is the value we can deliver that no one else can? Who are we going after? What's the market we're going to win? Then we will map that to a sales pitch. And usually we'll start by building a sales narrative, and we'll do that with a cross-functional team. So we've got marketing, product, sales together in the room, and we're working on that narrative. Once we feel like we've got it, then usually what I would recommend is we have marketing and sales come together and build a deck, a demo, and a script. Demo is optional. We don't always demo things, but if it's a demonstratable product, we'll have a deck, a demo, and a script. Then we want to go and let it loose in the sales team. Now, one thing to realize is that at sales teams, even if they complain about the pitch that they have right now, they're comfortable with that pitch. So new pitches are usually bad, even if the new pitch is good. So we have to be careful. It's not a fair test to just take the pitch, throw it over to sales and say, do you like it or do you not like it? The answer to that is going to be, we don't like it. So a better way to test a sales pitch, in my opinion, is we will take one salesperson. And what I like to do is let's take the best one. So let's take the best salesperson we've got, somebody that's been successful with the old pitch. We're going to spend some time training them on the new pitch, giving them lots of time to work with a script and try it out internally before we let them loose on prospects. Then let's do some practice test pitches on prospects. And what we want to do there is have the rep do the pitch on a qualified prospect. And at the end of that pitch, usually I would do this sitting in the room with the rep. So we're both there live for the pitch. And then afterwards we could deconstruct what's working and not working in this pitch. Usually what we've got is some tuning to do, like, we didn't like this word, or, when we said that, they were confused, or we have this slide, we actually need to bring that forward. So every time we do these pitch and then we tune it, we pitch and then we tune it. And then after we've done a bunch of this tuning, it feels like we kind of got a pitch that's, as tuned as we're going to get it. And then at that point, I've got the best salesperson in my team. And at that point, the salesperson says, yep, that's it. It's done. I don't think we can tune it anymore. And here's what I'm looking for that salesperson to tell me. Yes, we're done tuning it. I like it. I'm going to use it. And it's better than the old one.
That's the magic words.
If I hear the magic words, it's better than the old one, then I say, well, we're good to go. Now what I've got is a salesperson that's all trained up on this pitch, and I can use them to help train the sales force, and not just train the sales force, but to convince the sales force that this is better. So you've got the best rep in the land comes back and says, look, this pitch is better. I've got this bunch of deals in the pipeline and I got them with this pitch. Everybody should be on this pitch. Here's how you do it. Here's some advice. We can record them doing it. We can base the script off how they do it. And that's generally how I test a sales pitch.
Let's talk about jargon. This is the last question. How do you convince product teams to limit jargon when describing what they'd worked so hard on? Because they want people to be impressed with the feature set and the speeds of the feeds, but what's the turnoff for that, for the buyer?
I have a thing about jargon. Like, there is actually a time and a place for some jargon in certain situations. Like, one of the things I like to remind teams of is I think sometimes marketers get this idea that everything has to be dumbed right down. I'm often using this example. Like, people use the expression, they'll say, we should describe our stuff so your grandmother can understand it. And I'm like, unless I'm selling to grandmothers, I'm not sure that's true. So if I'm selling an advanced database product to, database administrators, it's okay if I'm using some terminology that your grandmother doesn't understand, but every data administrator in the land does. Like, that's okay, in my opinion. What we don't want is jargon that's meaningless or unclear. So when we start talking about something being next generation or innovative, like, it usually means we haven't got the right word for that yet. Like, when you say it's next generation, like, just say what you mean. Like, say what you actually mean. If we're saying it's innovative, well, innovative how? Innovative where? Why? What? I think the more specific and clear we can get on this stuff, the better. But if we have to use industry terminology to do that, as long as it's accepted industry terminology and everybody understands it, then I'm okay with that. And I think it actually helps customers. It actually helps customers develop a feeling that we understand their business, we understand the market that they're in. I think it's okay to use market stuff, but I think we have to be careful. Like, we can't just assume that customers understand a term. We need to know it. So we need to test that. We need to have feedback that tells us, yes, everybody in our market knows what this is, so we can use it. And then I think we have to be really careful about using just mushy marketing language like, innovation that doesn't necessarily mean what we think that it means.
The book is Sales Pitch. April, this has been so helpful. I really enjoyed listening to the audio version of the Sales Pitch. Where can our audience learn more about your thinking on sales pitches and positioning?
Sure. Well, my website is aprildunford.com. That's pretty easy. And there's a few things there. So I have a podcast, like, if you folks are podcast listeners, it's called Positioning with April Dunford, and you can check that out. It's really, on that podcast, I'm doing a lot of solo episodes where I'm picking a particular topic around positioning or sales pitches and going really deep on that topic. So that might be useful. I also have a newsletter. You can see it when you go to my website, but a newsletter where, again, I'm giving some very specific examples of things that I've done with some of my clients, or going deep on a particular topic. And then, of course, there's the books. I have one book called Obviously Awesome that's focused on positioning. And then the other one is Sales Pitch, which is focused on translating that positioning into a sales pitch. And you can buy those wherever you buy books. Oh, and then lastly, on social media, I'm on LinkedIn. That's kind of the only place where I ever actually am active, but you can follow me on LinkedIn. That's easy.
Thanks so much for sharing so generously on our podcast.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. For any resources mentioned on the show today, visit our show notes over at Experian.com/SMB Matters, and be sure to subscribe to our blog for articles and tips to improve your business credit. And if you're new to the show, be sure to follow us. And if you love it, let your friends know or tag us on Instagram. We are at ExperienBIS, #SMB Matters. Drop us an honest review and rating on whichever platform you're listening on. And if small businesses matter to you, shop local or reward them with your business online. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Small Business Matters podcast.